The American people should be extremely grateful and happy. No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
Here is what Ashley and Phil Rucker wrote for the Post after that speech. Quote, Trump's handling of the Iran crisis is in some ways epitomizing his presidency, with his remarks containing striking contradictions and remaining open to interpretation. He was at once unyielding in his rhetoric against Iran building a nuclear weapon, while open to talks with its leaders and pushing to involve NATO allies in diplomacy. You watched that speech. You've reported on the president for a while. What does it tell us about him at this moment? Is it Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hovering over his shoulder? Is he now a hawk, or is he still a non-interventionist in part?
The president at his core in many ways is whatever people want him to be. Different people can listen to that speech, from Republican lawmakers, from Secretary Pompeo, from world leaders around the globe, parsing every single word and hear what they want to hear. I do want to stress this was the president's speech. It was written with input from a number of people, but he was making edits in the Oval Office right until he went out, and that's one of the reasons he went out about 15 minutes later so into the grand foyer. But if you watch it, what was striking to, many things were striking to me, but one thing was he came out, the first thing he said, he walks out, he's sort of silhouetted in golden light, and he says, while I am president, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. And then he kind of paused. So that's the tough talk. That's what he wants to convey. And then he kind of pauses for a second, straightens his arms and says, good morning, and then gets into the meat of his speech, which is much more conciliatory and offers some, simultaneously while talking very tough on Iran, also says Iran could be a great nation. We look forward to potentially working together to fight ISIS, and I look forward for peace and prosperity for the Iranian people. He addresses them directly for the Iranian leaders. So you can take away whatever you want from that speech, but the final key thing is what the Iranians could take away was there was nothing in that moment that they absolutely had to respond to. He had taken the off-ramp, and he had not escalated it in a way where they felt to save face or for any other reason they would then have to respond.
Well, this is the dichotomy of this president, right? He wants to be the tough guy, but he also doesn't want to get, his promise was to not get into these wars in the Middle East. So he's stuck in this situation. And part of the twist on this is that folks on the Hill, you had Lindsey Graham there earlier, there's a lot of people on the Hill who want him to be more aggressive in the Republican Party. They think he's held back too much. So they were happy to see this. So you have that whole wing of the party who's happy to see him being more assertive in this area. It's a difficult juggling act for the president. And in those remarks, I think he seemed somewhat, anxious about how this was all being interpreted.